Well, this is a special live edition of Dateline News and Conversation. There's a few things that have got me raising some question marks in my head vis-a-vis Russia and its continued relationship with the United States after everything that's happened since the attempt on Putin's life on before United States Christmas in December of last year. What the United States did in Venezuela, capturing a Russian flagged tanker that Russia basically didn't really respond at all. It's just thank you for giving back our 3 crew members, which they haven't given them back yet. And then this has been going on for a while. This Witkoff and Kushner, 2 gangsters, real estate thugs, trying to make deals with Russia, sweet deals for gas and oil and rare earth minerals, et cetera, to try to get a peace deal in Ukraine. I thought that was bogus from the beginning. These guys are not diplomats, and I question why Russia is even talking to them. And now, just yesterday at Davos, Putin's economic guru, Kirill Dimitriev, met with Kushner and Witkoff. And this is the quote. Putin's special envoy, Dmitriev, praises the constructive talks with the United States. And in that article that I was reading on RT, Witkoff said it was Putin who invited us to the Kremlin for talks on Thursday. My guest tonight to discuss all of this, including the chickens have come home to roost in the United States with ICE in Minneapolis and several other cities. Eric Arno, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Regis.
So, Eric, everybody knows that we're 2 Americans. You've been living in China and Thailand now for a long time. I'm living here in the Russian Federation in Yalta. And we have very favorable views about Russia, the Russian Federation, the Russian people. You've been here several times, have many friends here. The big question is, why, after everything that's happened in my introduction, and I didn't mention that the United States and the EU continue to arm Ukraine in this special military operation. And the United States, in all of these favorable constructive talks, hasn't offered to remove any sanctions. So, Eric, you wrote something earlier. Why hasn't Russia just said Nyet? Your thoughts, Eric?
Well, I'm reminded of this because I think it was, wasn't it Molotov who said he was Mr. Nyet? There was a time during the Soviet Union when I think it was the Russian foreign minister, or the Soviet foreign minister said Nyet. He always said Nyet. And because the U.S. is always trying to get them to do stuff. And he said, Nyet, absolutely not. And it's a mystery to me why Russia hasn't just given up and said, just forget it. Now I understand. Now here's this T-shirt that I've got here, which may be an explanation of it. Maybe Russia really does not want to have a nuclear war, and so it's kind of like sweet talking a crazy person, But if the crazy person, if we're not dealing with a crazy person, but we're dealing with a rabid dog, then what do you do? So I think a lot of it depends on Russia's, and we're talking about the Russian elite decision makers who are, they're basically deciding on how they're dealing with all this. And to me, it is quite surprising that people like Dmitriev even talk about, these things. I don't understand, Regis, why the Russians have not said, look, you stole $300 billion from us. You've taken our diplomatic properties. You've shut down our consulates. You've thrown out our diplomats based on provable lies. And we have nothing more to say to you until you get things back on track. Why aren't you doing that? And I'm asking myself, why is Russia not saying that? I don't have an answer to it.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it from a purely, outside point of view. I have no connections inside Russian decision making.
I think that, and I thought this for quite a while, and a lot of other people, Russians and foreigners who have spent many years here working in Russia, analyzing the economy and the political situation. Vladimir Putin is not an authoritarian. He's nowhere near a dictator. He's got very powerful forces who love the Western capitalist neoliberal lifestyle. The head of the Russian central bank, Nabulina, I'm not sure if that's exactly how you pronounce her name. She's very pro-Western and liberal. And on the other side, equally strong forces, oligarchs, same thing, academics, influential people who are patriotic Russians, traditional, conservative. And I think that Putin has had to balance both of those sides. And when I try to figure out what Russian strategy is of not responding to so many red lines that have been crossed, and the United States seeing that as a weakness and continuing to escalate. But I think that Putin has not wanted to do anything to escalate the situation outside of the box. In other words, to go nuclear. And so I have compared it to Muhammad Ali's fight in the rope-a-dope, and I think it was with George Foreman. A 15-round bout, and everybody couldn't believe that Ali just went on the ropes and let Foreman just beat him, his body, and until, get to the 13th or 14th round, whatever it was, I don't remember exactly, Foreman was exhausted and Ali knocked him out. They call that fight the rope-a-dope. And I'm just wondering if that's part of Russian strategy, knowing that the United States, with everything that it's doing, is weakening as a country, as an empire. It's weakening militarily all around the world. And the rest of the world knows that. And so I'm just wondering if Putin is engaging in the rope-a-dope, letting this beast wear itself out and eventually collapse on his own, or Russia and China and India will just play the last card, and that's just basically dump the dollar and dump the United States economy, which they could do overnight. What are your thoughts? Do you think that maybe that's the Russian strategy? Or Eric, do you think that Putin is naive? I don't believe that. But do you think that Russia is just not wanting to escalate out of the box and wanting to keep talking and talking? Meanwhile, they keep moving in Ukraine. Most of Ukraine now is without electricity, heat, water. And this is the battle that Russia's fighting against the West and the United States. Your thoughts?
I'm disappointed in Russia and China and India. because during the Cold War, the lines were clear. And the reason why the United States and Europe didn't get away with as much as they wanted to was because the Soviet Union at that time and China were far more vocal or far more active in opposing U.S. imperialism. That's the way it looks to me. And the reason why things are the way they are is because I think the two issues, two factors. One is that the elites within the Soviet Union undermine the Soviet Union, and they have this long-standing romantic view of the West, which is really hard to understand. If they ever really studied the history of the West, how could they possibly entertain the idea that the West is some kind of role model of any sort, much less a moral role model? So you've got that aspect of it, and of course also the Russian people. Many Russian people realized they didn't realize what they had, and they wanted to have more consumer goods and things like that, and so they basically allowed the narrative that communism has failed to destroy the system, the communist system, and here we are now with there's no real active opposition to the genocide in Gaza, the continual wars, in Libya and Ukraine and so on and so forth. We can say, rope-a-dope, maybe that's what they're doing, but in the meantime, there's, 1 million Gazans have probably been killed, and more than 1 million Ukrainians have been killed. And this has been going on all over the world, and yet they're saying, we'll just let the capitalist West, let them have enough rope to hang themselves. But they're capitalist, so it seems to me that their position is not so morally clear.
Everybody has questions, and going back to the attempt on Putin's life, it was like December 23rd or 24th. Supposedly he was at his one of his residents in Novgorod, which also is one of Russia's nuclear triad bunkers. And there's been arguments going back and forth, and a lot of people believe that Donald Trump was complicit in knowing that there was an attack with several hundred drones that were all shot down, and a reported telephone call between Trump and Putin. And some say the purpose of that telephone call was to make sure that he was there, because they could tell with satellites where that signal was coming from. Trump obviously has shown himself to be a ruthless killer. He gloated about murdering Soleimani, an Iranian diplomat. He has no passion, no empathy for the genocide that's been going on in Gaza. He bombed Iran. He bombed Yemen several times. I'm reading that he's bombed several countries, whether it be the Congo or whether it be, I don't know what it is now.
Nigeria. Nigeria.
Yeah, Nigeria. So I wouldn't put it past Trump for trying to take out Vladimir Putin. And if it wasn't Trump personally, if he really didn't understand what was going on, there are powerful people in the deep state, whatever you want to call it, that basically are running things. Trump is just the face of this, and as long as he does what they like, they use him. What are your thoughts on that whole episode? And if I were Putin, and I'm certainly not, nowhere near the intellect that this man has, his grasp of history, his diplomatic posture. I'd be kind of angry, and not that it would force me to respond, although he did. He fired one Oreshnik, questionable about what it hit, but he fired an Oreshnik supposedly as a sign, a response to this attempt on his life. Eric, what do you think is going on here with that?
Well, the thing that's so interesting for me, Regis, is the fact that whenever you have somebody on that side of the line, whether it's the U.S. or Israel, the slightest provocation from the resistance results in massive retaliation, like massive retaliation. And on the other hand, when the resistance, when in the face of massive provocations by the West, the resistance is quite weak. It's tepid. And in the case of Iran, after the killing of Soleimani, there was one other example where the United States was sending drones right up to the border right up to the airspace of Iran, and the military said to Trump, they're going to shoot that plane down. And also, after Soleimani was killed, the Iranians staged a strike against an air base, one or two air bases in Iraq, and that kind of cooled them down for a while. But I think the problem with the West is that it is a psychopathic entity. The people there are so obsessed with their hegemony and winning and gaining control and defeating Russia and defeating China and taking over the world that they become less and less rational. And it may be, I don't know, it may be that Russia and China are just saying, this rabid dog would just, let it do what it's going to do, but we'll try and insulate ourselves. I don't know how effective that's really going to be. It seems to me that if they showed more teeth, the West would back down. But again, you have people like Brian Berletic, who I think is quite accurate. He's saying, in the end, the West cannot be placated. They want their way, and they will get it no matter what, unless they are put down. It's not a different situation from the Germany of the 1930s and 1940s, and the Soviet Union understood what had to be done, and they got it done, with the cost of millions of lives and terrible suffering. Well, we're now in a nuclear age where things could rapidly go out of control, and then we have a nuclear war, and then we're all dead. So it's a very difficult situation to negotiate. Maybe I shouldn't use that word negotiate. The difficult situation to find our way through, because the risks are very high. As I'm wearing this T-shirt for a reason. The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything but our way of thinking. So it's very difficult to say where this is all going. But to me, I just look at it, Regis, and it just looks to me like sooner or later we're going to be in a shooting war between the United States and its whatever lackeys it has, and the rest of the world, is especially Russia and China, who these are mortal enemies of the hegemon. In the hegemon's own mind, there's no reason why Russia and China have to be enemies of the United States. It's something that's manufactured in their own mind. So it's a psychological problem for the West. But there it is, and they're not curable. So what are you going to do?
I agree that the United States is an empire of lies and a genocidal murderer. It's been the history, not only from the beginning in the United States 500 years ago, but that's the whole history of European colonialism around the world. It was a matter of the stealing of land and resources and the killing of millions and millions of people of color that they saw as inferior. The United States picked up right where the rest of them left off, a genocide of who knows how many millions and millions of Native Americans. And then it was the theft of their land and the resources. And then with slavery, it was a matter of they stole the labor. America's economy was built on the backs of slavery. And, then you have the Monroe Doctrine and the Dawn Doctrine that is now applied to the rest of the world. We want it. We need it. We're going to take it one way or another. And it should be obvious, and I think it is, to Russia and China, India, Brazil, some of the other larger countries, that the United States is not trustworthy, that the United States has never bound itself, felt obligated to fulfill any treaty or agreement. It's broken every single one, including all of the nuclear treaties with Russia. The United States broke them unilaterally. The final one, the New START, is going to expire in a couple of weeks in February. And so when Russia and China look at this behavior, and, the Russians, and Putin especially, is a student of history. He keeps playing this tape whenever he speaks publicly about the United States and Western Europe. So he's aware of that. And so the question comes back to what we were saying from the beginning. Why hasn't Russia just cut it off? Why hasn't Putin just said, Nyet, we're done with you, no more talks? And I think the only reason can be is that I hope they're not bargaining. I hope they're not making concessions to Kushner and Witkoff. I just hope that what they're doing is they're playing the United States at this game and just hoping to really outlast. Because neither Russia nor China could fight a direct war with the United States right now. China is half a world away in Asia. The United States has got bases all over East Asia, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, all the way down to the Marshall Islands, Guam. And Russia is surrounded by American American and NATO bases, and is fighting an all-out war really now with the United States and NATO. So it's a very dangerous situation, as you said, Eric, and I too have been very fearful that this could quickly spiral out of control and result in the unthinkable. Nuclear war.
Regis, I'm not, I don't think it's quite as I don't see it quite that way. I just saw an article which said that Russia actually has 3 armies. They're only using 2 of them in Ukraine, and they could, and every one of them is equipped technologically to take out the U.S. Army. So that's one data point. The second thing is that in terms of technological dominance, Russia has the ability to do a preemptive first strike and take out every missile silo in Europe and in the United States. If it came down to that, they have Avant-Garde, they've got Sarmat, and the nuclear submarines. So it's not like the United States is invulnerable here. Even the Iranians, they have the reason why Iran was able to stave off an immediate attack was because Iran said, hey, look, we've got a lot of missiles. You've got a lot of bases. Those bases look very tempting to us. We'll be very happy to take them out if you do anything stupid. So they are somewhat subject to to rational thought when they're when they recognize that they're in a situation where they really are threatened. But on the other side, they're so obsessed with control that you just can't be sure of what they're going to do. There's one other point that I wanted to make here, which is that the way that there was a guy I used to know when I was in business, and he called it a negotiation between two adversaries called mutual mystification. where they're both kidding each other about what is actually going on, and they think they're fooling each other when in fact they're fooling themselves, but they think they're fooling each other. So this reminds me of Achilles. I think it's Achilles in the rabbit, where Achilles is chasing the rabbit and he says, "I'm halfway there. I'm halfway to the rabbit." And he's always halfway to the rabbit, but he'll never get the rabbit because it's always halfway. So there may be some element of this kind of mutual delusion that these businessmen, don't understand or appreciate because of their materialistic lack of perceptivity, you might say, as to what the real situation is. I don't understand why Russia doesn't say, "Look, Steve, Jared, you're wonderful people. We really, really like you. But return our goddamn $300 billion and open up our consulates and return our diplomatic properties. And then after you've done that, that will be a sign of goodwill. And then we can proceed from there." Okay.
Bingo. And you forgot to mention, why don't you relieve some of the 2,500 sanctions you levied on us? Give us a sign. What you just said, Eric, is I don't understand why Russia has not done that. Give us a sign. Don't give us these pious platitudes, that everything is looking good and promising in Ukraine. Give us a sign. Get out of Ukraine. Stop sending the money and the weapons under the guise of, we're sending it to NATO now, and NATO can then sell it or give it to Ukraine. I mean, this is such
a shell game. It's just a shell game.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I agree with you. In any kind of negotiation, I think Russia should be saying, "Give us a sign. Give us a sign."
Yeah, but they need to be much, much tougher on the West in particular, the West in general, and the United States, and Trump in particular. I mean, I cannot believe. I mean, these guys. If this is the Russian Federation, these are masters of diplomacy. Who is the guy they're dealing with? They're dealing with a real estate shyster from New York. What more do you need to know about this guy's character?
Same thing with Witkoff and Kushner.
Of course.
So anyway, I really don't think it would be too difficult for Russia to say, "Look, just give us one sign that you're serious." Russia hasn't done it, and the United States hasn't shown any signs of changing course, as you've been arguing. They won't, they can't. Now, Eric, I want to move on to, it's related. And you wrote, this was something you published recently. "I again point out the non-dualistic nature of reality." You continued, "The U.S. wars abroad have always been smoldering at home. It was Clinton who began the expansion of NATO. It was Obama who crushed Occupy, cut holes in habeas corpus, and who started the war in Ukraine. It was Obama's administration that started the war in Ukraine." And you continued, "The whole system is rotten, with their brains literally rotting. How else to explain the mentality of the recent presidents?" What are you talking about here, Eric?
Well, I don't know how it could be more explicit. What I do when I look at Facebook posts, when somebody posts something, and I have to emphasize again and again, American people are living in the United States of amnesia. They have no idea of history, why things are the way they are. They see an event without any kind of historical context. And as I mentioned, the roots of the Ukraine war, they go back to World War I. The West has been trying to peel away Ukraine from the Russian Empire. But even going further, you had George W. Bush, 9/11. 9/11 created the Patriot Act and created Homeland Security. And who did Obama use in crushing Occupy? Homeland Security. And then we wonder, where did ICE come from? It's all a continuum of this slow disintegration in the moral authority that the U.S. ostensibly had. So that's this is the legacy of literally decades of this kind of activity. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. And need I mention, it was a Democrat who dropped the atomic bomb on Japan, and they didn't do that to stop Japan. They did it as a sign to the Soviet Union. Don't mess with us. We've got this special weapon. We'll drop it on Moscow. And and as you and I well know, they had many plans in place, and we're just lucky that the Soviets had enough wherewithal to fend them off. It's the only thing that's prevented a new world war, is the fact that the U.S. has been intimidated not to start anything. But it's at this point it's reached such a level of desperation and obsession that it becomes even more unpredictable. So who knows where this is going?
Well, we can see where it's going, Eric. You mentioned the creation of the Patriot Act, the National Defense Authorization Act, which you didn't mention, and the Domestic Terrorist Act, which makes anybody in the United States a dissident, a domestic terrorist, if you contradict the official narrative of the United States. You mentioned Homeland Security was sent in by Obama to put down the Occupy movement. I was part of the Occupy movement in Portland, Maine. Fortunately, those thugs didn't have to come to Portland, because the people in the encampment, and I was documenting all of this, they were talking with the police department through all of this, with the mayor and the council, and it was understood that Occupy could stay in Lincoln Park. It was peaceful. They were not creating any violence there's no drug problems or any of that stuff. And when it came down to Obama's mandate, disband, the people in Lincoln Park agreed to freely take the camp down. And in the Occupy in Portland, Maine, the same thing happened in Augusta and up in Bangor. There wasn't any violence, but in other parts of the country, Homeland Security came in and just literally shut them down. Eric.
Well, Reed, I want to ask you a question. Were the people in the Occupy movement in your city given a what do they call it? A bargain they couldn't refuse? In other words,
no,
you leave voluntarily or else we'll crush you.
No. Why
did they leave?
Pardon me?
Why did they leave?
Well, because they realized that violence was happening and Obama was serious all across the country.
No, that's the point. There was an implied threat, and they realized,
but not by the city, not by the city of Portland. It was the threat from Obama and the federal government, Homeland Security. Yeah,
right. That's the point. That you don't need to have you don't need to be physically crushed. It's just like what's happening in Venezuela. We've taken out your president, and guess what? We've got all these ships around you. We're going to bomb the crap out of you, so you're going to be nice to us. It's that threat of violence that is creating much of the problem, and people are not willing to risk getting crushed, which I certainly understand. But Russia and China, they have the wherewithal to stand up to it if necessary, and they continually appease and bend and allow these kinds of salami slicing approach to the expansion of the empire?
Well, Eric, continue on the theme. The chickens have come home to roost because right now in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Homeland Security has sent in their thugs there. Uh, ICE, the immigration something or other effort.
Customs enforcement, immigration and customs.
Customs enforcement have got, I don't know, hundreds, maybe thousands of their thugs. Nobody really knows who these guys are, where they came from, who trained them. And I mean, it's got to be coming from Homeland Security under the direct order of Trump to disperse them. He first threatened it and did it to Portland, Oregon, then Los Angeles, California, then Chicago. This is not chronological order. Washington, D.C., which Trump crowed about how he cleaned up the city. It was the most violent and drug-fested city in the United States, and now it's safe and people can go to restaurants, blah, 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 blah. And the same thing to Boston, the threats to Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Note, all blue states, enemies of Trump. He wants to get rid of liberals. He's made them his enemy. And when we see what's happening right now in Minneapolis, where I'm sure you've seen it, oh my God, it was this terrible murder of Renee Good, who was trying to drive away. The video is obvious. And this thug from ICE ran alongside the car and shot 3 shots into the head of this woman and killed her. And the government has said this guy will not be prosecuted. He was doing his job. She was a domestic terrorist. And then, Eric, the shit started to fly. Oh, all of a sudden, they're talking about her partners and they're calling her a lesbian. You see how these evil people create these narratives that inflame people, that distort what actually happened. Well, what's actually happened is tens of thousands of people in Minneapolis, St. Paul are in the streets. Eric, many of them are armed. My son, who's a retired Green Beret, he said, Dad, there are more firearms in the United States than there are people. My friends in Minneapolis, 3 of them, live within a mile or 2 of where all of this happened. The shooting of Renee Good, the ICE, I want to be careful how I say this, but they went onto the campus of a high school. The teachers came out to try to get them away and leave, and they were tear gassed and tasered in front of the children. My friends, my classmates have been saying they actually believe that Trump is going to declare martial law, not just in Minnesota, but across the United States. Because 1, he fears that there are going to be uprisings everywhere now against ICE. And number 2, he's definitely afraid of the midterm elections, where he might lose a few seats in Congress and not be able to continue his unimpeded assault on the rest of the world and the United States. Eric, from where you're sitting in Thailand, when you look at what's happening in the country of our birth, where we grew up really as patriotic Americans, and we see what's happening now, I don't recognize my country. I'm looking at my country right now, and I'm seeing the fascism of 1941, 1942 Germany. What are your thoughts, Eric, from where you're sitting, about what's happening to the country of where we were born?
Well, you know, Regis, again, I am a student of history, and I had my first graduate course in American democracy in 1968 at the Democratic Convention in Chicago, where I saw police beating the heads of demonstrators who opposed the war in Vietnam. So I confess I've always been an opponent of U.S. foreign policy. But of course, I still had some notion that there's some kind of democratic process. But I would say by the with the Iraq War and knowing about Jack Kennedy's assassination, somebody pointed out recently, why weren't the American people on the street, protesting the obvious assassination of the president that could have been one of the greatest presidents, and they just kind of let it go. Same thing happened with 9/11. So the American people, and these scandals have been going on endlessly. You had Iran-Contra. With Nixon, he was prosecuted for third-rate burglary, not for bombing Cambodia, which was a complete violation of both international law and U.S. law. Staging an act of war in a country without asking Congress to declare, to give him permission to do so. So this has been a long slide, and I've been watching this, going back decades. So, when 9/11 happened, I just thought, this is, and knowing who the Bush family was and their ties to the Nazis, I just thought, this is not going to end well for us. And so that's the reason why I've been here. My most important course I ever took in university was the German resistance to Hitler. I was a major in German literature, and I knew that Germany was the country of Kant and Wittgenstein and Goethe and Schiller and many of these great writers and composers, and real leaders in culture, Hegel, philosophers. And yet something happened to that country, and it went really, really bad. And so, but then when I see the connection between what happened in World War II with the people who, the U.S. industrialists who were backing this, I could see that there's some other very, very deep endemic problems within U.S. society, and I dare say U.S. culture, because U.S. culture is infected with this kind of ideology. Obviously not all Americans are adherents to that ideology, but enough of them have gotten control of the government so that that's who's running it. So it's an extremely serious problem. I see this, the opposition to ICE is kind of like, somebody's been fast asleep for the last, since 1975 or so, waking up and saying, gee, I think there's something wrong here. Well, you should have noticed something wrong, 40 years ago and done something to correct it. The CIA should have been canceled, at least, and then following the Church Commission hearings. So it's a very, very deep-seated problem where I don't know where it's going, but the momentum is going to have to change in a really major direction. And I also want to point out one other thing, Regis, which is that it's great that your son, who is, my guess is he probably is a registered Republican, is my guess. The kind of libertarian wing of American society, they have a strong commitment to quote unquote liberty, but they've been allowing things to go on for a long time. And on the other hand, the left, quote unquote left, has been distracted by identity politics, and they haven't kept their eye on the issue of mass income inequality, the class war against the middle class, and the endless wars abroad, this imperialistic country. So, and I don't know, I'm hoping maybe that we see some signs of this, that the libertarian wing of the American culture and the more socially oriented wing, socialist oriented wing of the American culture will make common cause and rise up and do something about it. But that it's going to take some kind of major coalition of the American people to, to come to grips with this problem.
Yeah, I want to pick up right there. A major coalition. The last time you and I saw that in our lives was this massive coalition against the Vietnam War. It wasn't just old people in the streets like we have today. It was the young people in the colleges, the universities. It was the churches, the clergy, the priests, the nuns. It was black, it was white. It was Martin Luther King. And that's the last time we saw this kind of uprising, which changed the government. It changed its behavior. What happened after JFK, I agree with you. But, Americans were so terrified and shocked by that and immediately lied to about who done it. Okay? This Lee Harvey Oswald, this lone gunner. How many times have we seen that since JFK? The same thing with Robert Kennedy, the same thing with Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, just estranged, lone gunners, and nothing happened. But Eric, you talk about something needs to wake them up. I think Trump today is doing more to wake up the people in the United States, many who voted for him thinking, oh yeah, I'm great. He's going to bring back industry and help the economy and provide jobs. But freaky, he hasn't done any of that. And many of those people are waking up. Many of those people are seeing what he's done with Homeland Security, with ICE, and the threats of bringing in the United States military, which is against the Constitution. I think people are starting to wake up. And I think we saw it everywhere where people have been in the streets protesting. Portland, we saw it in Los Angeles, we saw it in Chicago, and we're seeing it right now in color, in 3D, in Minneapolis, what's happening. And not only has this shocked the entire country, there's nobody that isn't talking about it. There aren't any blue states anyway, that are not afraid he's going to do the same thing to them. But maybe this is the shock, Eric, that might wake people up. It certainly is doing that in a number of states, because most Americans believed in the land of the free and the home of the brave. They believed in democracy. They believed in liberty. And what we're seeing right now is not only Trump totally disregarding the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, he's trampled on it. People are seeing that, even if they're not historical scholars or deep into history, they have this basic idea of what they thought America was. They see what he's doing around the world, threatening the rest of the world, invading Venezuela, pirating oil tankers leaving Venezuela, threatening everybody, literally everybody. I cannot believe that most Americans, our compatriots, condone that kind of thuggish, brutish behavior. I just cannot believe that most Americans are in favor of that. And in fact, they don't. I read recently where Trump's popularity rating has gone below 40%. I don't have the facts in front of me. I just read, and I heard this on a couple of podcasts, that his popularity is fast falling. So, Eric, I guess the only thing we can hope is that the awakening is beginning to happen in the United States, that people around the country will rise up. And I'm always reminded that Americans are the most heavily armed people in the world. And they're not armed just to go out to shoot squirrels and target practice and to go hunting, because most of them don't. But most have multiple firearms in their possession.
Well, many do. Regis, my concern, let me interject here, it's one thing to have a bunch of weapons, bunch of what are they, AR-15s or whatever they are. The U.S. military has tanks. They have sound machines. They have lasers that blind people. They have gas. They have all kinds of things to deal with crowd control. So for people to think that that's going to work I have my doubts about it. But the deeper issue is that the U.S. There's no real ideology about what kind of a country we want that's different from the imperialistic,
Yeah.
Country that we were raised with. This is not the government of Benjamin Franklin and Roger Williams, who advocated tolerance, and Abraham Lincoln and Henry Thoreau, who opposed the Mexican War. So the country ideologically is lost. They don't have any. They don't. That is what we really need. We need to have a complete change of consciousness, where the people realize that this whole notion of individualism and capitalism and every man for himself, that makes the best of all possible worlds. That's going to work. That's not going to work. We need to work together the way it happened, at least during the 1930s, when there was a sense of solidarity. We're in this mess and we're in a depression. We've got to get rid of that, and we need to work together. We need a government of action that works for working families and working people, not for the military and the banks. That's what we need.
I think there's only a couple of places in the world. Venezuela was one, Nicaragua was another, a couple of other countries in Central and South America, China, and even Russia, although Russia is probably more capitalistic than these others. But socialism, where the government takes care of the people's needs first. And this was one of the reasons why Maduro was removed. The Chavistas before him, there's still people who believe that their governments have a first responsibility to care for the people. To talk about socialism or communism or some other hybrid in the United States has been verboten. You just can't talk about that. But maybe the people in the United States, with what's happening in the streets today, and you can't forget that what's also happening to the American public is their economy is collapsing. They can't afford to go to the grocery store. One of my friends just returned from the United States a couple of months ago. He said steak went from $2 to $4 in the grocery store. Eggs have gone from, less than $1 to $3 or $4 or more. People can't afford to heat their homes across the northern frontier and the East Coast. They can't afford to put gas in their cars. And Trump is telling you, oh, the economy is great. Look, Wall Street hit another peak. It's all bullshit. It's all propped up. But Americans who are there, the poor and the middle class, which is shrinking and starting to feel it more. They're starting to feel more like the poor in the United States. When you put these two things together, Eric, and Donald Trump acting as recklessly as he is in the United States and around the world, you have the perfect storm. And this is where I think, and I want to end the show on this note, we're looking not only at a perfect storm in the United States, but also around the world. Eric, your final thoughts. Go anywhere you want.
Regis, that's why I pointed out that I use this term non-dualistic all the time. What occurs inside is what occurs outside. What we do to the rest of the world, we do to ourselves. So that's the issue. The BRICS countries talk about multipolarity, where it's a win-win situation where everybody benefits each other. They have an actual, an honest, sincere feeling of helping each other, with fair business deals and things of that nature. And if the United States government, stopped being adversarial to its own people and realized, if the people are healthy and they have a good diet and they can afford food and they can get a decent education, then maybe the country will be a lot better off in the long run, instead of having all the wealth sucked out of the middle class and up into the oligarchs. So it's going to take a real shift in consciousness, and it's going to be something that happens worldwide. And it may be, as you suggest, that that these ideas of mutuality and self-help and helping other people at the same time will seep into America's consciousness, and we'll be able to turn things around. That's what I hope.
Well, let's not kid ourselves. It isn't the presidents of the United States. It's not their Congress. It's not the judicial branch. It's another very powerful force above and beyond what's happening in Washington and what's happening in the West, all across Europe. I think we both agree that it's a class warfare against the super rich, against the rest of us. And
it's a war on consciousness. They are waging a war not just economically, but against our own mentality. They're making us stupid by design, so that we will comply with them. And that's the ultimate battle. It's the battle for people's minds.
And it's a battle for our humanity, with everything they're doing with artificial intelligence, with everything they're doing with the media, artificial intelligence creating all kinds of video and print narratives that are fooling people, deceiving people. We're really, as you say, in a fight. It's a spiritual fight for our basic humanity. Eric, this was once again fun and very interesting. We'll look forward to doing it again, and I want to thank you for being able to respond to my urgent request from a few hours ago that we do this live show today. Anyway, take care of yourself. We're going to continue to do this, Eric, for as long as we can.